and we, oh, there you go. We're going to have a question and answer time at the end. And at that time, Judy will stop her PowerPoint presentation and you can either raise your hand in the Zoom or type a question into the chat. All right, so take it away, Judy, if you could share your PowerPoint screen, please.
Okay, let's see here.
So if you hit share screen at the bottom.
Okay, just a second. Thank you for being so patient. Appreciate it. Okay, how are we doing?
Good. Yeah, and then just
It's
hit
showing?
present.
We okay? We share. Okay, play.
Perfect.
Is that good?
Yep, looks great.
Everybody can see?
Yes.
Okay. Okay, so hi everybody. Can you hear me okay? How's the volume?
I can hear you well. Yeah.
Okay, great. Well, I'm really excited that everybody's joined us tonight to hear this really exciting topic. And I have a personal love of seeds. I did my master's in research in Ecuador, and I worked with farmers that were saving seeds, and actually they were selecting for really poor qualities. And so some of the things I learned from those years working with seeds, I hope to share with you tonight. It's a really great topic. And no matter where you are with saving seeds, whether you're thinking about it or do it each year, I hope that we can get some discussion going and you'll get some either tips or things to think about. But it's a big topic, and I feel as horticulturists and gardeners, it's something we can do. We can share with friends, encourage. It's great at Burlington how you're able to share seeds. I love that. That's pretty exciting. So anyway, these are some of the topics that we're going to cover. Why I think this is the time is saving seeds isn't, it's a timely process. And now with the seed catalogs arriving, it makes sense to figure out which ones, which ones you want to grow and if they make good sense for your growing situation. Not all seeds, not all plants would thrive. And really what we want to do is be saving seeds from plants that actually thrive so that we know we are actually growing and selecting for a vigorous plant. What I found as I looked at to do this presentation, there's just a wealth of information on the internet and outstanding YouTube videos. And I really can't compete with any of that. But what I hope to do, my personal goal tonight is to inspire you to share with friends and talk about the topic. But there are wonderful, great YouTube videos out there. But as I said, this is the time. It's, figure out which plants you want to save the seed, which ones make good sense. And we'll talk about what that is. And I'll just assume that you'd buy good quality seeds. It's true to variety. And so that you're starting out with the top quality that you will gather and save. As I represented in the lower left corner is a pepper plant. It's an annual. It completes its life cycle in a year. And that makes saving seed from an annual much easier. But what else this illustration will show us is the process that we're going to be talking about tonight. And this plant completes its life cycle from seed to fruit, to flower to fruit. And then the fruit ripens from the green to the red. And it's only after it's fully ripe and fully mature is that little seed, which is going to be an individual plant, is it mature enough? So that's why this is a timely process. We really need to be mindful that it could take 3 seasons to really see how well you've done. And so, as I said, there's many levels to get into seed saving. Some people just go out and gather some sunflower seeds, and that makes great sense too. So whatever level, there's things that we can do to learn more about it. Okay, here. Just a second. Doesn't seem to be moving forward, the slide. Okay, here it is. Just a little bit botany before we get going, what that seed is and why it's just one of the super wonders of nature. But it's a complete plant. It's ready to go. And it's the product of sexual fertilization when the pollen is actually transferred. And that actually makes it a little bit more exciting, and we'll touch on that later. But the seed, and most seeds don't make it. Most the food reserve is consumed, and it's only a small percent that actually go on to reproduce. So just the important parts to know about. And when we talk about keeping and collecting good seeds, you want to be aware of the seed coat and make sure it's clean with no nicks. I listed, some of the functions of a seed, and the most important, or the top one is, of course, is the reproduction of the plant, and to preserve the species. So it's a pretty important role as a collector, and just something that as we go through this, you'll see some plants we'll have more success with. They're easier. They have a larger food reserve, and therefore storing them, their food reserve won't be depleted. And if you looked at a seed, a big one, like a bean seed, there's lots of food there that'll keep that seed in a sort of a kind of resting state and last longer than a small seed like a lettuce seed. Okay, so big question, which ones to save? Well, I like to start easy peasy. So I say it's the right seeds that work for your garden, your setting that you want. And you need to, be mindful of the right time to save them and store them and save in the right manner. All of this information is out there, and it's all about just trial and error. One thing to notice is, on the far left, we have a mature bean plant where the fruit has turned into a dry pod compared to a wet seed. And this is some sort of winter squash. And it's a perfect example where the species crossed, and it's not the original plant that I really truly loved. It's something else. So this is a good time to study the seed catalogs, figure out what seeds you'll be successful with. And also, it's important to consider the cost. If you can get those seeds pretty inexpensively and they're hard to grow, maybe you want to buy them, but that's what you have to figure out. I like to start with easy ones, and Yitzi's provided us some super great charts that actually give us tips on what is easy. One of the things with seed, the ultimate success indicator is what we're going to call seed vigor, also an indication of seed germination. So what you are trying to do as a seed saver is to maintain and preserve the viability, and so that the seed remains vigorous, because all seeds are living entities, and during storage, they respire and they give off oxygen. So they're eating their food reserve, so to speak. It's depleting. No matter how good of conditions, respiration does occur. So we just want to be mindful that as we go into this, we want to save the right seeds at the right time. Okay, so I got a few hints. These are just basic, but you're going to be growing, let's say, these special either beans, peas, one of the easy ones. Flower seeds are easy as well, but the germination can be tricky on flower seeds, and that's an important part we'll touch on later. But I put some tips. And again, we've got the annual plant that's going to complete its life cycle in 1 year, and the pollen will be transferred from on the mature plant, and that becomes the seed, the fertilization. So if you're going to be producing seed, no matter what, at what size, whether it's a few plants or a dozen plants, you want to take great care in producing high quality plants from which you're going to save the seed. Many people have like a seed production plot. Well, a lot of us have really small gardens, so we can't do that. So that is why, if you really want to go about this in a sort of a really technical or scientific way, you're going to take super good care of those plants that you're producing seed. You're going to make sure you don't have any weeds around them, water carefully, net if needed. It depends on what your situation is, and really keep a handle on the diseases. Okay, when it comes time to harvest, you really want to be very careful that you're getting a ripe, mature seed that has all the parts in the food reserve to make it through this storage period. Some of this is common sense. You're just going to sieve the product and get rid of any foreign material or seeds that aren't perfect. And that's why it's important to kind of go back and look at, with a hand lens, the parts of the seed, so to make sure there's no nicks. We'll touch on how to store, but really the bottom line is cool and dry. I like to use the number 100. The total relative humidity and temperature combined have to be below 100. And the reason the relative humidity is critical is that seeds, due to the nature of their makeup, are hygrostatic. That means that they are going to give up and give off moisture depending on the ambient relative humidity. So this is something you have to be mindful. If it's very humid, the seed's going to gradually suck up moisture. I think that, like in a refrigerated situation, that's possibly where you can achieve that under 100. I use a small gauge that tells me the temperature and the relative humidity. I don't have the ideal conditions. And again, as home gardeners saving seed, we aren't going to have the ideal conditions. So we have not only the challenge of saving good seed and growing good seeds, healthy plants, but we don't have those ideal storage conditions for the most part. But I think with picking easier seeds and following these directions, some of them aiming for it, you can save some seed. Okay. I don't know why this isn't moving forward. Excuse me, it's not. Okay, I guess there's a little pause there. Sorry about that. So we have these wonderful planting guides that will really supplement all this information that you'll find, but it's all consolidated here. And these charts are really available to help you with which ones are easy, which are more difficult, and just some of the things to jump out right away, if it's an annual, perennial, or a biennial. And just to go back over that biennial is a plant that takes 2 years to complete its life cycle. So saving a biennial is an added degree of difficulty, because you would have to overwinter that plant and grow it, because it's going to flower and the seed will be mature the second year. The first year, it's just vegetative growth. So right away, that's going to be trickier, quite tricky, because not all of us have a setting to keep that plant living through the winter. But you can also see the life cycle, the species, because we're going to touch on by cross or hybridization, and that's what we don't want to happen. We want to make sure that only the pollen from that bean plant, for example, pollinates the flowers on that bean plant. And that brings us to why it's critical of maintaining an isolation. Okay, and that's because that the species can cross. And if you look down on our chart right here, so many of the brassica, the broccoli rub, the Brussels sprouts, they all are in the same genus and species, so they can cross. And well, some of them are. So that would be really tricky. Besides, they are a biennial, again, adding a degree of difficulty. And as you see, if anything, something of that nature, there's a large isolation distance of 800 feet. And many home gardens are smaller than that. So that's something to think about. This chart also gives the valuable information about keeping the population. And this is pretty tricky stuff. And I don't have the key to this, so I'm not quite sure what it really means, but it's showing you that you need a large number of plants to make sure that you're saving and you have the genetic makeup you need. So I'm not totally comfortable with that explanation, but I think there's a lot of information, and these tables are fantastic. So let's see. I think that's all I wanted to say about that, but okay. Okay, and one of the critical points in saving seed is you want to know what you have. And you want, as I mentioned, the plant's own pollen to fertilize itself. And these are things that you can manage, and the best cultural practices are that isolation distance. Although the chart said itself, many of those that self-pollination occurs with a male and female plant on the same plant. There could be an insect activity or wind that could move pollen as well. And again, what we're trying to prevent is the unwanted crossings, as I got in my winter squash, and because we're going to get an unknown quality. Hybrids aren't always bad. Often they can produce superior plant characteristics, decreased disease resistance, or better quality in some way or shape. But for us, we want to make sure that we can control the pollen. And again, that's when the pollen self, it's from the same plant. Okay, here's another great seed chart. I love this one because it's even simpler. It actually gives you some miscellaneous information that says which are good for beginners. And this is a really important thing. And again, it touches on the distances. Okay, there are some ways around this. I have seen it in the commercial area that, let's just say you don't have the distance, but you really want to have two of the same species. And again, you do have to produce quite a few plants. It's not really a good idea to take your seed from just one plant. You could be selecting for not all the best quality. So that's why the charts, I'm not sure about this one, but number of plants. So you can see that you do have to grow quite a number of plants. And then you're going to pull the mature seeds, and make sure what you save is representative of the lot. And again, I said that, hybrids aren't all bad, but from our standpoint, that's not what we want. Now, in a commercial setting, they could actually control the transfer of the pollen, mechanically transfer it, and then they would bag the pollinated, the fertilized fruit to prevent unwanted pollen from coming. Again, depends on what level you're going to be doing this. Okay, so this brings us to, again, making sure that the plant is at the right life cycle, and it's often not the best time to eat the fruit or use the flower for even dry flower arranging, because it's past its maturity. It's senescing, which means it's at the end of the road, dying. I mean, and what I put this chart, I don't know if you can see it, it's far over here on the right. And it just shows you that there's a really clear lifespan for a plant. And we want to save seed that's fully mature, has all the food reserve, and is going to provide the exact plant, and an individual plant that's going to flourish or thrive. Okay, so as I said, you want to definitely be collecting from a mature flower or fruit. These are both examples of wet seeds. Earlier, I showed you the dry seeds from the dry bean pod. I have the squash and then the tomato. The process I use is just, pull them out, and then by floating the seeds, I gather the excess plant material, and just by cleaning it and sieving it, I gather the seeds. And you can see you get a ton of seeds, and I have 1 million squash seeds there. But again, that when I cooked up the seed, when I cooked up the squash, it really wasn't pleasant tasting. So I think I had an unwanted cross. And that could have easily happened. I didn't have the distance, and they both of the plants flowered at more or less the same time. So that was a learning experience. So throughout this, I really encourage you to take good notes. It's so easy to forget what you put in a place, or which tomato seeds those were you put there. But what I do is, after I've cleaned them and floated out the foreign or unnecessary plant material, I dry them out. And I first started on newspaper. Paper towel is good too. And as you're drying it over a few days, you just want to move those seeds around so that they don't paste or become glued onto the newspaper. And with time, with a couple days, they'll be nice and dry, and you can move them around with either a forceps or your hand, and you'll be able to tell how dry they are. And that again is, just something that you're going to kind of make a subjective call on, that they're dry enough, because we do want to get them into the proper storage situation as soon as possible once they are fully dry. So the whole goal here in seed saving, I mentioned from the beginning, your job is to preserve, maintain the viability of these good quality seeds and good quality plants that you grow. So you're sort of trying to keep the viability up. And there are some factors that are working against you. And those, you can find it on the chart there, the first chart, and it's indicated by the genetic preservation and variety maintenance. So those numbers do kind of reflect back how hard it is. So as I mentioned before, the smaller the seed, the harder it is to save it, because this seed is utilizing its food reserve. So to start with, the bigger the seed, easier to do. And what we're doing here is, with these seeds, the longevity it's based on the genetics and the environment. The environment, we can manage that to a degree. We cannot manage the genetics. So our indication of how well we do on seed saving is based on the viability. That's the indicator. And we use germination. And so again, I gave you the ideal conditions. I touch on it again. It's that sum of temperature and relative humidity. And there's gauges to measure this. So you need to keep a handle on that. So germination, that's our indicator. And it's the process from when the seed starts to imbibe the water and until it makes its own food. And I indicated here the whole process. And the exciting part is, once those first true leaves come out, it starts to photosynthesize. So germination is the water uptake as the hormones are activated. and the utilization and the conversion of the food reserves to get the radicle, which is the root, and the plumule to come up the shoot. So in order to have this happen, whether it's at your home or in your garden, it needs, a combination of good aeration, good moisture, adequate temperature, and light in some cases. Now, in the germination that I'm going to share with you, that I germinated some beans, the length of time was 7 days. So many seeds are 7 days, but that information is out there. Some take longer, some take a cold treatment or to be scratched or given heat treatment. But again, keeping with the easy ones, 7 days is kind of the limit. If the seed hasn't germinated in 7 days, that's a loss of vigor and a poor quality seed. So here's what I did at home, because you're going to want to test, and again, you're going to be doing this germination, like let's say you save seed from last summer, 21, you're going to be testing the germination of the saved seeds, like right before you plant, so that it'll help you know how heavy you need to sow the seeds. It'll also, it would be a good way to select from my germinated seeds in here, these little, you can see the shoot and the radicle coming out. I mean, one way to be certain is to pick those, and you're going to plant those. You first go into a smaller receptacle and then, go with that system. But that's, it, rather than just put it out in the garden, in the soil, this is one way of knowing exactly what you got. Because so often our soils and our conditions are harsh in the spring, and it's hard for plants and seedlings to get going. So germination is the marker of your success. In my paper towel wrap here, what I do is I took three sheets of paper towel. And it's good to put a number in there. I usually try to have 10, but it looks like I have 12. And you pick good seeds of your sample that you want to grow this new year. And I put two sheets of the wet paper towel, and on top another sheet wet. And I roll them up, and this is pretty crude, but it worked. And I tried 2 different methods. One, I used saran wrap, you see up in the top right, and I sort of made it kind of tight little, and it was pretty moist. And then the other one is I had a bag that the newspaper comes in, and I put the paper towel wrap in that. I'll say that the one with the, the loose bag worked better. I think that the saran wrap, there wasn't enough air, but it's what I had, and it was interesting to see the difference. On the far left here, you can see what's used like in a laboratory. It's a classic germination paper with the tomato seeds on it. And but you can get good results with this paper towel wrap, and you can see by looking at your seeds that germinate in 7 days how many germinated, and those that are just starting, they're what we call low vigor. So that's something that we don't want. We don't want to be selecting and growing low vigor plants. We want to pick those really perky ones that are going to shoot out of the soil and produce a very healthy, thriving plant. Again, keep good records with all of this. You can see my quick little label up there. Sometimes I forget which bean, which squash, what I put in there. And again, it's good to start with a number like 10, and that way you can figure out if it's 60% germination. And one of the things you should know about germination of seeds, by law, seeds don't have to be too high. Vegetables, 80%, and flower seeds, by law, only have to be 50. And so that's why some seeds are pretty hard to germinate. We have great seed sources, and I'm sure that you're going to get great quality seeds, but often with flower seeds, you just don't get 100% germination. You might be looking at 60 or 70. So this is all about having fun, and experimenting. And talking with friends and others that are more knowledgeable about what ones really work for them, and, expanding your garden. And, we really are, playing an incredible role in saving, plant genetic diversity. So back on the paper towel wrap. So that's one way, you're getting ready to plant this out, see how good you did. Most people do an indoor seed germination where they have a soilless media. And again, that media you want to get moist and not too cold is important, good aeration, sterile, bottom heat. Most seeds want a temperature of 75 to 85 in ideal conditions. Beans, they would generally not be germinated indoor. We traditionally go direct to the field with beans, and they can take a much lower temperature. But if you want to do this and make sure it works, I always like to start things indoor and take out the seeds I want. And whether you put them in a small little pot, just give them a start. You can easily produce 10 squash and 10 bean plants. Though again, bean plants could get a little unruly, but I like the idea of knowing what's going out rather than waiting for it to come up, and possibly something in the soil has attacked the seed. So anyway, I just want to kind of put a little summary on it. I love this image. It was really hard to get images on the internet. You really have to work hard. So this one was a free share. And as I said from the start, it takes time to do it. And it really takes time to do it and compare what you've saved. If you wanted to go through the whole process, besides just gathering, saving, storing, growing the seeds out the following year, you would best want to grow the original plant out too. What I like to do is compare the original with a saved seed and see how I did. And again, we want to be only saving the seed from the best plants. And that can often, you can easily save inferior plant by, for example, what the farmers did in South America. They saved the seed that they didn't sell, and that they didn't eat the bean themselves. They sold them to their neighbors in Colombia. So what they saved was the old seed, and they had terrible yields, and they had what we call hard seededness, which means that the seed could not imbibe the water. So they were indirectly selecting poor quality, and with time, and hopefully that they got that they should have a seed plot, and they too could produce quality plants and have quality seeds and increase their yields. So now we have time for some questions and comments, and perhaps many of you have tips to share or thoughts about this, because it's a great topic, and I am interested in hearing what y'all have to say. Okay, I'm going to stop saving my screen. Okay.
All right. Thank you so much, Judy. So as Judy said, now we have time for questions. So you can either raise your hand by going to reactions in the bottom right and selecting raise hand to ask a question, or you can type in the chat. And we did have one question so far. So in the chat, can you freeze seeds?
Yes, you can freeze seeds, and there's a lot of information, as well as there's this super great germplasm seed bank in Norway that is doing great stuff. So yes, you can freeze, and that's a great system. Yes, yes is the answer.
Anybody else have any questions? Oh, here we go. Are there seed saving swapping groups that you know of that are active in Vermont?
Well, I think you mentioned what you're doing at the library. It sounds like you are on top of it more than I am. So maybe you could tell us what you know because you're doing it.
Yeah. So as I mentioned at the beginning, we have a seed library here at the South Burlington Public Library, and that's on the second floor. We have some card catalog drawers with vegetable, herb, and flower seeds, both donated by seed companies and also by community members. And then we are having an actual seed and seedling swap event on April 21st. I also know that there are a number of other libraries around the area that have seed libraries and seed swap events. I think Richmond does, and Charlotte, and I know a number of others do. Okay, the next question is, what would eat seeds after planting? I had trouble with beans. Okay, what would eat the seeds after planting?
Okay, so the plants, bean seeds are pretty tough, but the plants could be attacked while the plant is growing. And there's a multitude of things. But seeds, the major problem for seed deterioration in South America with the farmers that I've worked at and with indigenous farmers, small farmers, not major seed companies, would be a weevil, a seed weevil. And the actual insect comes as an adult and would land on the plant in the field. And then the adult lays the eggs on the seed. So that's one serious, problem. So there's a multitude of things, but usually what happens in deterioration, it's poor quality seed, okay? And it could be hit by a storage insect, but it's usually in a combo with a fungi, some sort of fungus, whether it's penicillin or aspergillus. So the seed is respiring. It's doing a lot of respiring. So it's creating this high relative humidity around it. And so it's just a really poor quality seed. And you sort of like a rotten apple, you've got to go through your seeds and remove anything that would have any nicks, any discoloration, because there are lots of pests that will go after a nice tasty dry bean seed.
All right. The next question is, I have been saving scarlet runner seeds for a while and they do great. Can we cook and eat these like any other dry bean?
Well, I think you can, but I would look that up. That's a great question. That's the perfect question on the internet. I haven't, but I'm sure they're eaten someplace and somehow. So there's nothing, got to look it up.
The next question's about the guides that you shared. And just so everybody knows, I wanted to make sure that you saw in the email that I sent to you with the Zoom link, the guides are attached, so you can print those off for your own information. So the question is, I'm confused about the seed saving guide columns. What does variety maintenance and genetic preservation refer to?
Okay, I think that's a really great question. I'd ask Yitzi if he had a key to this. The first ones up on the left are pretty straightforward. Okay, so my best guess is that, again, there's all different size growers that are doing this. So, perhaps some are really small, some are big, but in order to maintain the variety, you need to have at least 20 to 25 plants. I'm going to start with the top one. Okay, that's a lot of plants because you can't just have one plant and think that you can take the seed and you will maintain the variety. You won't have a representative sample. You could be selecting. And again, that's why you want to grow a collection of plants, the same species, genus, and you want to have enough plants so that when you dry the seed, you're not just selecting from one plant. So to keep that variety strong and healthy, that's how I interpret this. Okay. Why something like, some are much smaller. So I wasn't really sure. And the genetic preservation, I'm not sure if that means the germination. So that's a good question. And I don't know for sure. I must say that when I was a graduate student studying seed deterioration, the Seed Saver exchange was not around. And this is really fantastic. And I wish I could give you more information on it. But that's all I can surmise right at this moment.
So we have a clarification about that. So
oh, good.
Someone says, so like you plant a row of beans and then take a bean from different plants. Like I see it says 5 to 10 for beans here. So would that mean taking a bean from 5 to 10 different bean plants in the same row?
Well, that's how I would understand it, but you're going to be taking a lot more than 5 seeds. So you're going to be harvesting many pods from each of the 5 plants. Again, you want to be saving, as I showed in those jars, a hardy population, because they're going to, so that's what it does. I think it means. So that's a good point. And so, I'm afraid I can't answer any more on that.
I have a question. I guess, like for self-pollinating plants, like tomatoes, how strict do you really need to be with the isolation? I mean, I understand that this chart is aiming for, genetic preservation and purity, but for a home gardener, if I'm going to be and I wanna participate in genetic preservation, but I'm not like the strictest person ever, and I'm not a scientist. Like, is it okay to not abide by those isolation distances and number of plants and everything to the absolute utmost?
I think it is. And I say, bravo, experiment, try it out. This is, in the picture perfect way. And again, I think that it's all about experimenting and trying it out. Why not? Be mindful that that is a possibility, but 10 to 50 feet, that's not too far. And so I'm not sure what the degree of error is in this. And I think you have to experiment, try it out, learn, talk to people, and ask, I have a small garden, I want to have different tomato plants in there. As I said earlier, you could definitely, depending on their flower time, some varieties would flower at a different point. So the pollen's not available to be transferred. So that's a good way. You pick varieties that would be an early, late, mid, and you could get around it. You could also cover once, and again, you could actually control the pollination by having a little paintbrush and moving it from one flower to the other, and then quickly bagging the flowers. But I think by maybe picking varieties that have different, but you got to make sure that that works for your needs. But I think there are ways around it on a small scale. So, but I also think it's easy to make mistakes, like with the squash. Some are easy to, like gourds. They're very easy to produce gourds, and you sure don't want your winter squash to look half like a gourd. So.
Does anybody else have any questions? Oh, here we go. I've always wondered if I can plant a whole frozen fruit like a cherry tomato or strawberry. Can you get away with saving without the work?
I think that there's a, with a very vigorous plant, and you had a vigorous, a healthy, mature, I mean, you have to have a mature seed. You have to have a viable, mature seed that's going to germinate. So yes, you could put, let's say, you froze some cherry tomatoes and you threw the whole tomato in your garden in the spring, and you just, wait and hope, and you'll get something for sure. Tomatoes, they always germinate in your compost pile. And so that's one way to do it for sure. But if you really want that tomato, and it's the one that you've been dreaming of and thinking of, you'll want to have that good seed that you don't want to have to wait to order, and you have it in your freezer, and you're going to use your seed to get that in a more controlled situation.
That's a great idea, someone said. Anybody else? Any questions before we close? All right, well, and yes to eating scarlet runner beans.
All right, good.
I have maybe just like a closing question or request. Could you take us through? So, say beans are one of the easiest seeds to save, right?
Right.
All right. So it's February now. Could you just take us through sort of a snapshot journey of this season of bean, from starting it to saving it, just the different steps?
Okay, that's a good one.
Yeah, just quickly before we close here.
Okay,
Yeah.
so let's start with, we want to buy the seed. We're going to get true to type, high quality seeds. You've checked out the catalogs, and so you order your bean seeds to start with. So that's what we're going to call the new seed that you're going to make your seed from. Well, you're going to sow that seed whenever it's planting. You'll probably direct sow that bean seed out in your garden in a really nice little plot that you're going to take care of and watch it and water it. That seed will mature, the plant will mature, and depending on how many days, many beans we can get in May, and you can, some are 90 days, some are 87, you can get 2 crops. But let's just say come summertime, the pods mature, and the pods actually splitting, and you can collect those seeds. The dry bean is one of the easiest because it dries down by itself. So that's really easy. So you've grew the plant, you had like 5 or 6 plants, and maybe you took a couple pods from each one, and then you pass those seeds through some sort of system where you took off the pods, kept the seeds, allowed them to dry for maybe a week. Not in direct light, but you'll see that you can physically see when the seed becomes dry. So those you're going to save. Come September, you'll put them in some either plastic bags, which you going to put in your freezer, or maybe you have glass jars that are going to go in your refrigerator, and those seeds are now staved. So let's say next year, 23, now's the time that you want to see how good your seeds are. So we'll be starting to germinate those seeds probably maybe in beginning of May with the paper towel wrap in your home to make sure that your germination is pretty good. And again, they're a tough one. They found those in the bottom of tombs that were, I don't know, 1,000 years old, and they still germinate. So the bean seed's a good one. So this time, or it would be summer 23, you're going to have your beans that you grew from the good seed. It's a good practice to have grown the original seeds so that you can compare the purchase seed from your saved seed. Okay, now if all the plants check out, and you can see that certain ones are really thriving and are fantastic, you're going to pick, say, 5 pods from each one, or perhaps I think that the chart said 5. And then you're going to select some pods, and then you're going to clean those up, and you'll continue to do this. One of the things you have to remember is bean seeds, not so, but most seeds, they lose their vigor in storage. That's just the way it is. So you're going to have to be maintaining your seed stock. And that's where it's good to have friends that do this. And so how about, did that give you sort of an idea of the process? So it's really a 2-year commitment, 2 seasons before you can see how you did.
All right, great.
Okay.
Well, thank you.
Okay,
Thank you,
you're welcome.
Judy. And unless anybody has any more questions, I think we're going to close here. So thanks so much, Judy, for the wealth of information and encouraging us to take part in this important process. Someone says, thank you for an excellent presentation.
You're welcome, everybody. I
Yeah, it
hope
really
you get
was.
excited by this.
Yeah. Thanks, everybody, for coming. And we're going to continue the conversation and this process of saving seeds with the seed and seedling swap on April 21st. So if you have any seeds left over from last season, or seedlings, tomato, eggplant, pepper seedlings that you've already started and you want to swap those, we're going to have that here on April 21st. And you can come anytime and get seeds at the seed library. All right. Okay, so thanks, everybody, so much for coming, and happy gardening.
Thanks, everybody. Good luck.